everybody. Let's first start thanking Daniel. Thank you. As well, who served all of the booze out of this place.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you as well to the other readers here. I'm so excited to read this. I'm going to do some things I don't normally do. This book is machine written, so I thought I would read some of the human written poems that came out of it. So how it works is I co-created an app that translates chess games into poems. So they start as source poems. There's 12 of them, 6 for the white pieces, 6 for the black, and then each of those poems are 8 lines of 8 words. So each square on the chessboard gets a word, and then when the piece moves to a square, it triggers a word. Then there's some computery stuff that makes it sound a little nicer. But I thought I would read the source poems because I don't normally read them. So these are kind of like the bedrock that then the machine stuff's put on top of. So this is Borges for the Black Pawns. If the rules of the riddle forbid the mention of the word itself, then we sink into the labyrinthine forking paths made possible by infinite variations around a central core full of imagined authors with permanent memories and a tolerance for unfinished works, of strands forever dividing, bifurcating until the system itself contains every possible breath, every move, every piece, every person, every god. This is Deep Blue for the Black King. Deep Blue was the first computer program that beat Garry Kasparov, so it was really the first computer program to beat a world champion chess player. The true terror rose murky from ocean beds, sublime and primordial, the ghost of digital echoes. They collided, each converging and informing the other until a human move, perhaps conspiratorial, perhaps bug, but always the distinct move of a species unto itself, a genus rooted in binary evolution, half brute, half artist, not a mimic, but the first of a bloodline, a series of kings. And I'll read the one for Tal Calvino for the White Rose, off of his novel, Invisible Things. We should imagine a chessboard as big as a kingdom by shifting helmets and seashells successively. Each piece is rule-bound by the season's weather, coherent yet always self-destructive, reforming or reassembling like the small worming paths of a caterpillar. That passageway is not a deformity, but rather a necessary harmony, a melodic chorus tuned to a keyboard clicking, a rook sliding, and a crown. And I'll read the one for Alice from Alice in Wonderland. This one's for the White Bishops. There's a beautiful game. How many of you have read Alice in Wonderland? Do you remember the chess game in it? The chess game in that is actually not playable. And when you actually go to try and play that as a game, he's making up rules and letting pieces move in whatever direction you want. It's actually kind of fun. If we purr and check, then we must confront the surreal as if it were stable. We must chase dormice like rabbits, like a castled king, along an always logical path, along red and white opposition. It is a path along a narrative operating system. It is a directory, but it is not a promotion, unless we carve an open rank for a queen-protected pawn. And it really was a kitten, after all. I will read just a little bit from the actual book itself. What it is, it's a collection of chess games by Marcel Duchamp, translated into poems using this engine. It was inspired by a game that Duchamp and composer John Cage played here in Toronto at Ryerson. They built a special board such that when a piece moved to a square, it triggered a sound. And so it made this beautiful symphonic piece. Duchamp, very, very good chess player. He beat Cage. He played without his knight and beat Cage in about 20 minutes.
He beat Man Ray.
What's that? He beat everyone.
Did he beat? Is it true? Am I right?
Yeah, he probably beat Man Ray. I would imagine.
I think I'm right.
Yeah. You're always right.
God bless you, buddy.
So I'll read a few. This is him playing white versus Jacques Millet in Nice in 1931. Mechanical sand, sealed act interlocks and questions, considered sketch. Coherent sounds, resistant sound towards spoon. A slice moving menu and poison instantly flavors promoted decomposition. What is cloudy applause? Coherent reassemblage. Erratic mirror and the redundant textbook moves towards power. And to give you a sense of the other side, this is him playing black versus Jakob Adolf Spitz in Nice, 1931. It's a shorter one. Diagonal instant, each blazing violin appreciably screens and butts a wink. Certain core and chord darkly combine the memory, or they erect noise. And I'll read one more from here. If only it's the last poem of the book. I'm not spoiling anything. If only because it's a correspondence chess. By the end of his life, he was actually one of the best correspondence chess players in the world. So here he is playing 4 different people at once: Grime, Luring, Ray, and Crabbe in 1961. Blazing estimate or diagonal half mimes and inquires chord texture. Memorize screen in the database. Texture places underneath thought, or each butt times screen, and the habitual isolation forms or strands beyond. Thank you. If you come and get it from me, there's a couple copies. I'll give you a free chapbook that just came out. This is Above Ground Press with Ottawa. This book also has a lovely introduction from Jennifer Shahade and pictures, if you don't like reading. She's a 2-time U.S. women's chess champion, and the introduction is really, really terrific. We used to play, there's a picture of us here where she's playing me. I have my eyes wide open, she's blindfolded, and she just kicks my ass. So that's in there, and then there's also some visual poems from Derek Williams. It's a beautiful book. I'm going to close just by reading a relatively short passage from Why, also a very beautiful book from Coach House. It's about Robert Oppenheimer, who was the director of the Manhattan Project, who led the building of the first atomic bomb. So it's a book about a lot of things. It's a book about science. It's a book about duty and morals, and what a brilliant person should do in the face of that. It's also a love triangle. I'm not going to read the sexy bits. I usually do, but there are sexy bits. So they're in there as well. But I think I'm just going to read from The Explosion. The good deeds a man has done before defend him, he repeats, as he lies on his stomach next to Frank in the bunker. The pre-dawn storm, its pingings against the metal roof, have since washed down the San Andreas ranges, driven south by the strength of the slanting winds, and they have been there for nearly 24 straight hours, waiting, quietly listening to the fevered mating croaks of the frogs from the pond next to Trinity, now waiting at the central point between the sun setting and rising. And he thinks of Krishna explaining that from formlessness all forms proceed at dawning of the day, and at dusk they sink once more into formlessness away. And he is between dark and dawn and the rocket, and then he hears a disembodied voice counting down over the speaker. The radio signal crosses surreally with another, and Tchaikovsky intrudes the Nutcracker Suite, and the musical strains merge with the numbers until 1, then 0, and he knows that the control room has switched the current on, that pulse following the miles of electrical lines strung until it reaches the tower, the gadget, and he knows that the plutonium at its core is condensing with an incredible inward force, and he is mentally tracing all this when the bomb goes off. And he raises his eyes from his face-down position, and he looks through the bunker's welder's glass, and he is transported to the battlefield where Arunja is begging Krishna to reveal his ultimate form. And in order to see, Krishna grants him divine sight, beyond the capabilities of any prior mortal. Look, look, Krishna implores as he transforms. With innumerable mouths and eyes, faces too marvelous to stare at, dazzling ornaments, innumerable weapons uplifted, flaming, as the whole New Mexico landscape is obliterated by a wall of impenetrable white light, as 1,000 simultaneous suns are rising and standing in the noon sky blazing. The early morning darkness is brought immediately into daylight that quickly shades to ice blue, then violet to purple in milliseconds. The colors imprinted upon his eyes and momentarily blinding him, measureless, massive sun flame. And in his blindness, he imagines the whole universe of bodies contained within Krishna, as Arunja describes it. Your eyes are moon and sun, and you burn this world helpless and tired. And he pictures the bulb of the bomb's detonation, a half-sphere rising and expanding from the ground, filling itself until it lifts entirely from the earth as Krishna's astounding, terrifying form and his sight fades back, and the landscape begins to rematerialize, the light saturating the dark ground, the swelling foothills, the craggy sides, and the sharp peaks and ridges of all the mountains as you touch the sky, many-hued, and at the center of the light, golden and yellow burning to orange, is a flaming stalk of sand erupting with enormous heat, and he looks up again at the column exploding miles upward, and he thinks of the temperatures at the base of that detonation, so incredibly hot that the sand is instantly reconstructed into glass, and that glass is cast up into the air and immediately solidified, those hunks raining down to the ground. And when he follows the explosion's pillar, he sees it topped by a reddening cloud, and thinks of the warriors that line each side of Arunja's battlefield, and how Krishna's divine form swallows them, as Arunja tells his god that when he looks upon him, that he sees those warriors entering with hurried step. Their jaws are fierce-fanged and dread, and I see them with skulls crushed, their raw flesh stuck to your teeth. And seconds go by as he watches the slow blooming in mid-desert, and he has not exhaled yet, and he does not look at his brother next to him. And then he feels the warmth spreading across his exposed arms and face, increasing and flushing his whole body as the shell over all of him. And then the heat increases so rapidly, he is sweating, and he feels a rivulet begin to work down his hairline, and still he does not move, not even when the pressure slams into the bunker, a solid and impenetrable current that barrages and shakes the walls of the low-slung bunker, and the sound of it simultaneously hammers him, and he tastes the grit of the desert with that air as it lines his nostrils and coats his mouth, and he thinks that all food forward will carry this residue, these particles, the last piece of language that fills his mind before his body is completely overwhelmed, the pillar and the cloud, the heat, the smashing force of the air, that sound beyond human or animal construction, that which could never be made by natural throat. And his body lies amazed and docile, and still one clear message surfaces, singular and completely formed. And he pictures droplets in a bathtub, and the concentric circles that they form on the surface, weakening with distance. And he lies and he watches the mushroom as it expands in slow, silent motion, watching its full unfurling, knowing that it's essential to watch what he has made all the way to his completion. And as he stares, its shape does not change, but only exaggerates. Its scale, now mountain high, recalls Krishna as Shiva. Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds, annihilating all things. Thank you.